I'm here today because it's important to make sure that there's a visible resistance against what is happening as a result of our government-sponsored violence, and we need to make sure that our communities feel protected and safe.
Hello, everyone. We are back, and we're here with Stefanie Santiago. How are you?
Hi, Lo. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
I met you kind of, even though we live in the same area, I met you because you were doing this district leader initiative. And I was like, this is really interesting, and I'm just kind of like, who's this? And I went to one of your actual talks on it. It wasn't even a talk, it was a workshop. And I
Yeah.
thought it was so informative. I was just kind of like, oh no, I'm on a PC. I can't do screenshots. But I was just like, this is a really interesting thing. That's kind of like why we have you on here to kind of like educate the public and inform people what's going on, especially people who are not from New Jersey. So with that, I want to know what led you to get involved in local Democratic Party politics?
Yeah. So I feel like part of that is it's trifold, right? I like to think that it started with my move to Bloomfield in 2020. I knew that becoming a first-time homeowner meant that I wanted to be more involved in the community I was setting roots in. And I was just trying to figure out where do I start, and what route do I take? So in general, I've always been pretty passionate about politics, and I realized that I had more insight on federal level politics than I do local, which I think is the case for a lot of us. But being the case, I wanted to try and see how the local politics operates and like what processes are involved and how to get involved. What I noticed was there was just a lack of access to that path. Then, fast forward 2 years later, 2022, I had a homeowner issue, and the issue was resolved for me, thankfully. But that's not what I initially went with my initial complaint. I wanted to make sure that this was resolved at a systemic level because I didn't want this issue being repeated for anyone. And that gave me a little exposure to just the way in which our municipality approaches problems. And I personally just didn't like that there's this unequal representation, essentially. And so, that was another reason for me to think, it feels like I need to figure out how all of this works to actually know how to address some of these concerns that were coming up at the time. And then, of course, the third component of this is my experience in running for office last year. This is the first time that I ever engaged in like the election process, and not just to get myself to try and win a post, but also to like help elect other people. And it was also my first time trying to run for office. And what that exposed me to was the way in which the party infrastructure tends to give certain advantages to some candidates over others. And we're supposed to be the Democratic Party. We're supposed to be about democracy. That is something that I found to be problematic, and has just such a huge influence on our election outcomes. So those three experiences combined is what kind of got me to try and pay a closer attention and look for the ways that I was able to make a contribution to some kind of change.
Oh wow, that's pretty interesting. That I mean, because yes, we moved to somewhere and we want to kind of like figure out like how to get involved, how to do things. And how did you first learn about the role of district leader?
Yeah, so the way that I learned, and I think it'll vary for other people, but for me, it was by showing up to town council meetings. That's where I actually bumped into district leaders who, their role was unknown to me, but they were just neighbors showing up to express certain concerns at the time. And then in talking to them, they started mentioning this role. And then all of a sudden, I'm realizing, wait, there's a network, there's a structure to this. And in hearing that, I then started realizing, okay, there's more to learn here. And I would ask questions, and then I realized that overall district leaders, again, with what I was observing, were made up of two components. There's district leaders that show up at town halls and are engaged in the process of like trying to lead meaningful changes, and then there's district leaders that kind of show up more so for elections. So I started noticing there's that the function of this role was variable. And again, it just like with any position, and your role is what you make it. But in first learning about this role, I noticed too that even the district leaders themselves didn't have a cohesive message on what their role was about, what their actual duties were. So even though I learned of the role, there were still a lot of questions that couldn't be answered at the time.
So what, and this is something what you're actually trying to do, is what is like in plain language, what's a district leader? Like in the in the zeitgeist, in the map of the Democratic Party, you have council people, you have mayors, you have assembly people, you have senators, you have Congress people, you have state senators. Okay, all of this. Who's a district leader in this map? Who are they? Like in plain language, somebody who's never heard of it. Like, what could you say? Because they don't really have a language. So I'm kind of, it's up to you. What is a district leader for a person who has no idea what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it depends on what level of government you're talking about, right? So plainly, a district leader is your representative within the party, right? It is an elected position. It is a two-term position. So this year we'll have another election for that. Um, Essentially, they're the bridge between the party affiliated voters and their respective party. So they're supposed to be engaging with the public, trying to expand its base, right? To make sure that the base is growing, and that means more support for the party. But also trying to maintain a system that tries to recruit new leaders as well. So a part of the role is also determining the process for that. And again, what we see is that every municipality will have its own way of organizing their own party committees. But for Bloomfield specifically, we have three wards, and each ward has its own districts, right? So it gets broken down further. And I think this is just to make representing people more manageable. And so each of those districts has two elected representative, and this is for both parties, not just the Democratic Party.
Okay. No, I was wondering. So this is an elected position. It's every
Mhm.
2 years. And I guess another question I have are like, what did you find that, because this position I think is not as well known. What do you think, were these are the gaps and barriers that inspired you to launch the district leader initiative? Like, was there like something that kind of made you go, people need to know about this, and not only do they need to know about it, I want to do a workshop like on a weekly basis to show people, because a lot of times I think, especially as a district leader, as someone who's running, as for people when they're running for office, they kind of, I think sometimes they don't want people to know because they're like, oh, that person might run for office, I don't want them to. But you seem to not have that thing. So what do you think, like what inspired you to launch this, to kind of get more people involved in actually running for office? Because I know each of your workshops you kind of go, so who's ready to run?
Right, right. So again,
Go
the
ahead.
role of district leader is about voter engagement, but also voter empowerment. And it has its pro and cons, but each municipality can organize itself however they want. And that's where, it's that gray area that has such a tremendous impact on our elections and what voters actually see. And so when I think about the tremendous influence that it has for voters that it might also not be aware of these internal politics, right? I realize, no, this is information that everyone needs to know. So when you look at just in terms of accessibility, there is none in Bloomfield. You can compare Bloomfield's Democratic Party committee to Montclair. You can compare it to Verona, Glenridge, Nutley, and then the ideal party that, from my opinion, would be Maplewood. They all have websites. They all show who makes up their party leadership. They'll give you access to be able to determine who your representatives are and how to contact them, right? So these are some of the gaps that I found were in place, and it really is a disservice to voters because without knowing who your representatives are means that your voice isn't actually being represented within the party as they shape their vision, as they recruit their candidates, as they choose what candidates to support. And again, that creates this uneven playing field, especially during primaries. Primaries are meant to vet the party, right? They're meant to find the leader that best suits the voters' needs in that time. And if we're allowing our party to operate obscurely, there's a risk that in many ways it gives advantages to certain political insiders. And I don't think that's what these parties are meant to do. I think that there's also so many ways to improve it, and I want to be able to share that information. Not just who's in it, but also to give that comparison to other parties to see what it could be, and give people the ability to reshape it so that it is more proportionally representative of our community.
So, what powers or responsibility come with the role within the Democratic Party? I guess in the Republican Party would work differently. Oh, I have another question, and I don't know if you even know this.
Sure.
Does the Green Party have district leaders? Is that just a Democratic Republican Party thing, or you don't know? It's okay if
You
you don't.
know, I don't know why it's set up this way, but my understanding is that there really only is the infrastructure is set up for the two main parties. And then any miscellaneous party, no offense to the Green Party or the Independent Party, they tend to run in the general. But the primaries are partisan, and for some reason it's only built for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party during primaries.
Okay. So, what roles or responsibility does it do the district leaders have within the Democratic Party? Like, do they, I mean, other than telling people, you have an issue and they take it to the council person, or like, what roles or responsibility do they, recruit people to run for office? Do they, I don't know, endorse people? I'm not really quite sure. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, would not be the first person to be confused about this. Also, there are district leaders that are confused about this, and that's the problem. Right? Like if the district leaders themselves are unsure about what they have, what capabilities they have, what steps to go about making certain changes. Unfortunately, again, it's a disservice to then anyone who's affiliated with the party outside of it. But in terms of the roles, again, it's what you make it. So the district leaders themselves get to decide what their bylaws are, meaning they get to establish the rules, the processes for how any of their work gets applied. Um, Typically, what they're in charge of is again trying to maintain the relationship between the party and voters so that information is accurate and that the party is making decisions based on current preferences of their base, which is such an important piece of this, right? If there is no interaction between district leaders and their voter base, who's how are they making these decisions internally? Um, Secondly, there's the role of recruiting new candidates, right? So it's also about bringing in leadership to be able to again make the Democratic Party. I'm just referring to Democratic Party in this case, but this just applies to any other party. Um, to make sure that the party is choosing leaders that are going to be effective. Um, internal responsibilities that people don't wouldn't think of is that they fill vacancies. So if there's ever a vacancy in the council, if someone runs for another office and so they leave their current position, the party that elected official belongs to gets determined, they determine who fills that seat. So they have an interview process and they decide what that interview process is like and who they choose to then bring forward to the council to select, right? So some of this is gatekeeping, right? Who gets into these elected positions to represent the party. When there are vacancies, they get to establish committees internally. So a lot of the work that you would want to see the party doing, they can organize it. Right now, as far as I'm aware, there's only an executive committee, which is just the top leadership, right? And they're the ones that um, determine how often the party meets, right? How those decisions get made. Is it only the executive committee that decides it? Is there a collective process with every district leader? So it, it it's the systemic process of getting our party to present itself to people.
No, so like how much how much autonomy does a district leader have versus, the county like leadership or the city leadership? Like you kind of said, oh, if a council person wanted a district leader, like, oh, I wanted you to be district leader. But what if somebody, is not part, somehow they won an election. They're not connected to anybody. Do they have
Right.
do you have autonomy? Like, can you essentially not do what you want? Yeah. Can you make decisions on your own and not be part of the, I guess, the traditional, or maybe like the status quo, if I can't think of a better word. But
Yeah.
can you kind of go off on your own and be like, I don't, I think this or I think that. Like, I mean, I think the thing is I find interesting is that when you showed me a list of the district leaders, there are people who are district leaders who I had no idea were district leaders. And I was kind of like, that's interesting. But I mean, why would you not like want to share that? Why would you not want to be like, hey, I'm a district leader? Like, I would think that
Right.
would be something that you would do. Am I, is that weird? Or am I like not getting that? Like, what is, do you know what that's about exactly?
I don't know what it's about. I think that's a great question for them. I think it's like why is this the case, right? Why do these gaps exist? When I look at how other parties are organized, it's hard for me to not think that this is by design, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if it's left to be exclusive in this way, then those who are in the party get to make decisions without really any accountability, which again gives advantage to some people that are in there. And um, as you noted, like there are elected officials that are also part district leaders in the party. So that's a great question for them. I think that this for transparency purposes and also just to try and again fulfill the duties that have such tremendous impact, right? I think this should be a role that gets discussed very openly because otherwise how are you gauging your base or engaging them to help you make better decisions as a whole? But to answer your question, um, what I have noticed is that because it's managed so poorly, there's no real cohesion. There's confusion over what the bylaws are, and then there's, variable communication, or an absence of communication even among district leaders themselves. There's also what I've noticed is that there's this pattern of district leaders trying to just do what they can, right? So as I mentioned before, I met some at town council meetings, right? So they're trying to show up and create change through the council, but that's not their role. Their role is to manage the party infrastructure and
Mm-hmm.
create that vetting system that allows the party to thrive and to look competent. You know, uh, when it's going to fulfill its duties. So can they do whatever they want? Yes and no. They have been. They have been. They shouldn't be. There should be a unified, or there should be a code by which they operate, right? And they should all be in unison in that regard. But again, it's how they establish the bylaws. It's how the executive committee includes all district leaders in certain decisions. Um, I think that without better management, it's leaving the district leaders to sort of like just make the role to whatever they can be. But you do represent your district, right? So you do get to decide what relationship you're going to have with the voters in your district. And then it's a matter of and how the party wants to show up in that district. I hope that answers that.
No, it does. It does. I mean, the thing is that, here at D1011, we are very into investigating space and power, and space can be virtual space, physical space, a space
Yeah.
within the political system. And just like how it's so important because you don't realize, people don't realize, oh, who you elect for president or a congressperson or whatever. It affects laws. It affects judges. It affects all kinds of things that you think like, oh, this is, it seems like a little thing. Kind of like, okay, another kind of leads us to the next question. Why should a regular person care about the district leader? Like, why should I care? Like, I just want to vote for the president. I vote every 4 years for the president. That's it. I don't need to know all this other stuff. I just want to go home and just be left alone. Like, why should a regular person who's like maybe doesn't view themselves as politically engaged care about this role?
That's a great question. And when it comes to local politics in general, it is our most immediate environment, right? So local government, period, has the ability to make meaningful changes at a faster rate than federal level politics or federal level government. And so, why should someone care about this role? Why should someone care about party committees at all? Well, it's because they're shaping your elections. They're the guardrails to democracy. And if we're allowing parties to um, give advantage to certain candidates over others, they're not giving you all the choices, right? The choices are being made behind the scenes, and you're just assuming that because they're a certain party, that they're meeting the principles that we all believe in for that specific party. So the parties shape elections because they decide who gets the support. And if that's not evenly distributed, then I don't know that that's democracy, right? That's how kings and queens operate, right? They give advantage to those who are in closest proximity to them. It risks political patronage. These are all the things that erode true representation that's decided by voters versus, again, the network that's in charge of creating the processes that get the candidates and up to running for office, right? But also, um, they're supposed to be representing you. If you don't know who your district leader are, it sounds like they're not doing a good job, especially if you're an active voter, because they have access to who's an active voter versus who isn't, right? And I can talk to you at another point about like how you can obtain this data, but they're aware of who the active voters are. If they're not meeting those people, again, the question goes back to, well, how are they meeting their basic duty of being the bridge?
Mm. That's a good question, and just good ideas to think about. And you know, we're almost like it's so interesting, but we're almost done. But I want to know, like, what are some of the formal requirements to run? Like, do you have to live in the district for a certain amount of time? Do you have to live in the district in order to be a district leader? I know because there's something office that you don't have to live in the district to be a district leader. But how does, just just a few, not every single one, but what's a few of like requirements to be a district leader? Do you need a
Yeah, I
degree?
think No, no, no. Just like with any public office, there's no criteria other than you just need to live in that region. You need to be 18 or older, a registered voter of that party if you're running for a partisan position, right? Um, and to be a citizen, right? There is no formal experience to actually running for office. I think you know what, I could be wrong, but I think the only exception is for president. I want to say that there's an age requirement for the presidential position.
It is. I mean, like President of the United States, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You'd to be 35.
Right,
But
right.
you can have a felony though. That was really interesting. You can't vote, but you can have a felony and still be president. I thought that was a really interesting little fact. But anyway.
Right, right, right. But that I think that's the only position I know that has an actual age requirement. But for the purposes of district leader, it's you just have to live where you're trying to represent. You have to be 18 years or older, et cetera, everything that I mentioned already. Um, Two people can run per district, right? So it is a max of two representatives per district for district leadership, and you have to be an affiliated voter of that party. So like you can't be a Green Party affiliated person trying to run for the Democratic Party. You would have to switch parties because again, it's partisan. Um, and we shouldn't have third parties getting to decide the infrastructure of, their opposing parties anyway. But yeah, to run the position is every 2 years. So we have an election this June. The elections for district leaders only take place for the primary versus, other positions. There's a primary and a general because it's partisan. The primary determines who wins, and that's it. And then, the next 2 years, you can try and run for office again. What you do is you take a look at when petitions become available. So you can just call your municipal clerk's office or email them to try and see, when are petitions accessible or can be picked up. And you only need, so this is the interesting part, a minimum of 10 signatures to run. And that petition is for two people. So you split that by two. You really only need a minimum of 5 signatures to run for this position.
Wow.
Right.
So
So
anybody can run.
literally anyone could run. You just have to care about what you just have to care about making a change for that particular role is responsible for, right? But really anyone can run, and the requirements are super, super manageable. And the role itself is undervalued. It has a lot of power and influence again over how the party ends up presenting itself and what the results end up being. It's an important role. I think everyone should, if you're someone who cares about politics, um, the local level is what determines that first impression. And so there's a lot of potential with having your local government be that source that makes you feel good about how you're represented in comparison to federal level, which is, feels out of reach in some ways. You can have a more immediate effect at the local level.
Wow. And the last question I want to ask is if someone walks away from this conversation, like what do you want to leave them with? What do you want them to remember, and what, in your vision or whatever. I know that's not one question. Pick one and
Yeah, yeah.
respond.
Yeah. Well, I would say oh, I know some of that's being challenged right now, but we live in a democratic country. And so, um, when you see things that you are concerned about, I don't want anyone to ever think they can't do something about it. It's just about figuring out how to get there. So, if you're thinking about how the party is operating, don't think that that's something you can't change, right? You don't have to fall victim to the wait your turn mentality that some of our parties tend to have. Going back to the basic requirements, 5 to 10, if you're two people, if you're a full ticket for the district leader role, meaning two per district, you just need a minimum of 10 signatures. Don't think that you have to have approval from the party to jump in and make a difference. And if at any point want to talk about that, feel free to reach out to me. I can also, just like I very much share in the presentation, I'll give you the list of all the current district leaders because you might know one, and then you can have the conversation on why didn't they share that part of themselves.
Wow. So thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. This was actually, and I told you this when I went to your workshop, this was actually one of the most useful informational meetings that I've ever been to. And I highly suggest everybody who is just interested in politics, just interested in information, to check out the initiative that she has. I mean, actually, I think like if you're a school teacher, you should probably have your students like listen to it. Like, they could like go and like have you like do a presentation because the thing is that, as you said, if you're 18 years old, you could be part of this. So I think you're doing such important work. And with that, thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you, Lo.